not only am I a very, very proponent of change, but I just have to, you know, when your mother calls you, you need to come over and support your mother. She's definitely been a surrogate to me, and so I, as well as my boss, the Honorable Ronald C. Green, are in total support of you, and whatever you need for me to do, you don't have to whip me, just ask.
Thank you very much. I won't leave my daughter out. Erica, you're
Tried to hide.
You're fine. Erica's fine. Ladies and gentlemen, any questions? I know Bob would be welcoming them, and I'm going to cut them off in a moment, but I don't want to keep you, and plus there will be some one-on-ones. But any questions that you might have that we all would benefit from hearing and listening to? There's one in the back there. Yes, sir.
I have
Doctor?
I have one question. First, let me acknowledge Jason as well, because in my view, basically, Morgan Stanley's losses came out again. So I'm very appreciative of that.
I agree with that.
I think I read previously how you founded BET. I think you mentioned John Malone, and it's one of your benefactors. Can you, in a very summarized way, share with us how you really founded that business and how that's transformed your other business career?
Well, yeah, I think the, and this is a theory I have, and that is that, unfortunately, white America doesn't delve too deep into how many black people they want to know. If they know one or two, they pretty much stop. So if you figure that, you know, you want to get something done, you got to get out there first and got to be visible, because, you know, they're going to say, they'll know me, and they'll talk to somebody else who knows me, and they'll talk to somebody else who knows. So if 10 white guys know me, and I'm the one guy, so it's like I got 10 and 1 chance of getting any deal white folks are going to do, simply because they all go to the same club and go to the same. What we need to do is to have that same kind of support base in the black community. So we don't do that, and that's sort of the challenge. But when I met John Malone, I was a lobbyist for the cable industry. I wanted to start BET, and you got to think about this. BET is really simply an extension of what John Johnson did with everything. We just did it electronically, via satellite. He did it with pictures, and he targeted the African American readership that want to find out what was going on in the black middle class and entertainment. And he sold advertising, and he sold subscriptions. We did similarly the same thing. We sold advertising, and we sold subscriptions to the cable operator. So we had similarly the same kind of business philosophy. Is we believe that there is value to be created within the African American community. Still believe that. And as the Congresswoman pointed out, you know, one of the things we're doing, I'm going out to speak to the prepaid conference, and because the biggest challenge African Americans are going to face in the future is access to capital, access to credit, access to capital, and borrow. And so what we've got to do is figure out a way to harness the economic power of the African American community to create opportunities within the community, because there's a huge outflow of money from the black community to the other community. I went to I didn't go to Harvard. I went to Princeton, but don't pick on me. But the one thing I learned in the economics class was something called the marginal propensity to consume. Black people have what's called the highest marginal propensity to consume, which means we have a lot of debt. And when you got a lot of debt, somebody is holding that debt. You know? And when that debt is being held, and it's not being held in the black community, it's going other places. So we've got to figure out some way to bring finance back into our own community and access to capital so we can grow internally. And that's what I'm going to try to do with the Bank I Own Urban Trust and our attempts to bring a product called microloans that sort of was pioneered in some of the less developed world. And we're going to try to bring that model to urban America. But on the John Malone thing, I met John Malone because he was looking for cable programming, because cable systems were beginning to build urban markets. And I was looking for a distribution partner to help me with BET. And John Malone was a quintessential supporter of entrepreneurs. And he came to me and said, Bob, if you got an idea, come talk to me and I'll support you. So I came up with this idea of starting BET particularly because there was a need for it. And so I called him up and said, I want to come out and talk to you. He said, okay. And he said, what do you want to do? And I said, I want to start this company called Black Entertainment Television. He said, how much is it going to take you to start? I said, about $500,000. And he said, okay. And this all took place in about 30 minutes. He said, here's what I'm going to do, Bob. I'm going to buy 20% of your company for $180,000, and I'll loan you $320. And you'll be 80, and I'll be 20. Is that a deal? I said, that's a deal. What John didn't know, if you reversed the numbers and said, I'll be 80 and you'll be 20, I would say, it's a deal. I would take it either way. Because, so I'm saying, again, it was all within 30 minutes. He brought his lawyer in, wrote up a piece of paper, couldn't have been no bigger than this file over here, and gave me a $500,000 check. Now, keep in mind, I'm from a family of 10 kids. I grew up in a family of 10 kids in a small town called Freeport, Illinois. $500,000 is equal to the whole GDP of the town. You could have bought the entire black part of the town for $500,000. So I get the check, and I said, but I'm smart, so I get the check first before I say this to John. I said, John, I've never run a business. What advice can you give me? But I had the check by then. So he said, Bob, simple. Get your revenues up, keep your costs down. That was my business model and everything I would do. I just up and down. So John put his 180 in, the 320 was debt, remember. But what he did, and this is something that's really important that we need to do, is create this. He stayed with the company for 18 years as on the board or chairman of the board. And what he was for me is a green housekeeping seal. You know that thing where, you know, that award we get? Because they say, Bob, who's in your company? And I'd say, John Malone. And all of a sudden, doors would open. And if you don't have that kind of brand or that kind of support, BET never would have gotten to where it is today. Because every time I go to a bank and say, I'd like to borrow money, he said, well, who's backing it? Malone. And he also owned cable systems, which was a help too. But that's what the tie-in was. So flash forward, when I finally sold BET in 2001 to Viacom, you got to remember, the other thing John did, he never sold a share. Never sold a share of stock. He always believed in the company and always believed, and he kept putting money in as the company was growing. And one day I asked him, I said, John, you know, you kept putting a little equity into the deal. You know, you put it in his debt, you didn't put it in his equity. I said, why'd you do that? He said, Bob, I always knew you'd work harder for you than you would for me. And that's sort of the relationship we had. But when you flash forward to when I sold it in 2001, keep in mind, John put $180,000 of equity. 320 was debt. The debt got paid back. When we sold it to Viacom for $3 billion, his 180 turned into $750 million. That's right. I didn't do too bad either. But that's how it happened. I mean, it's one of those things where, like I said, you make your friends before you need them. You got to be in the right place at the right time. And you got to understand how, you know, it takes a little bit of vision. It takes a little bit of a willingness.